Hello everyone and welcome back to another Philfakov presentation at the Philological Institute of Fine Linguistic Analysis. Today we've got an episode that's not going to be that different from something you might have seen before, but it is very interesting. We're going to look at the Times of India again and compare it to the Sydney Morning Herald, which I don't think I've compared before. So it is interesting from my point of view, from a cricketing point of view, because India is a cricketing country and Australia is a cricketing country. And India has produced possibly the best batsman in history, certainly in recent history, Sachin Tendulkar, an absolute legend of the game. I saw him live playing. It was just unbelievable. The guy was a magician with the bat, an absolute magician. And Australia, another cricketing nation, unfortunately, just today or yesterday, one of our greatest bowlers in the game, Shane Warne, and some might argue the greatest ever. It's a bit difficult because you have very different types of bowlers. He passed away, but yeah, another cricketing nation in Australia. And so, what happened when the cricketing nation of India, if they did open the Times of India on a specific day, what would be the front page news that they would get? And let's have a look at the picture first. If we don't read anything, we look at the picture. It's kind of, we don't know really. It's just a lot of people. It really reminds me of the annual Chinese migration for their New Year, the Chinese New Year. It is actually the biggest human migration in history every year because it gets bigger and it's bigger than anything before it. So seeing pictures like that really reminds me of the Chinese New Year. But it's not. It's a different story. If we read here the headline, the title, which is in the picture, Russia declares ceasefire to allow civilians exit from Mariupol, Volnovakha. Okay, so I don't know really what to give this picture. It's fairly peaceful. I just feel like there's a lot of people there. It doesn't look that bad. It's bright, it's sunny, that always helps. So I'm going to give it a 0. Yeah, because it doesn't seem to. So 0, if you remember, it means it's neutral feeling. It doesn't generate that, positive or negative feelings in me. It's just like, okay, that's interesting. What's that? Now, obviously, if you're Chinese, you might get excited. Is that our new year? If you're from a different country, you might look at that and go, that's absolutely awful. When that happens in my country, that's real pain. So, interpretations might differ. I'm going to go with a 0. The title itself here, Russia declares ceasefire, is a very interesting one. This is again about the war in Ukraine. The actor is Russia, so it's a country, and then Russia declares. So let's stop and think for a second. Declare is projecting speech. I declare. Is it bad or good? Well, it's an authority. The person who declares, like, interestingly, my son, he declares because he's the authority. I ask him and he declares. But typically, it's looking down. If I declare, it means I'm more important than the other things around me. So we don't know if this is negative or positive yet, but Russia declares does give it authority and power. And typically in newspapers, the positive people are given authority and power. Not necessarily, but typically. Maybe I'm wrong. Think about that. Go away and have a look at different titles. If you see declares, announces, calls out, demands, these stronger projecting verbs of speech, they're usually for the positive side. Okay? Declares what? And this is an important thing. Declares ceasefire. So in the context of a war, declaring a ceasefire is an absolutely wonderful thing. Absolutely wonderful. I think let's take another moment just to say we all hope that there can be a permanent ceasefire in Ukraine, that this horrible situation come to an end, and that in other wars, in other conflicts, there can also be ceasefires that will be lasting and not temporary and fragile, but sturdy and solid ceasefires. Okay, so this is quite positive really, to allow civilians. Okay, so in previous videos we've seen horrible collocations like kill civilians, and here allow civilians exit. Exit is quite a formal neutral verb, and so I'm actually going to give that a -2. It's quite raising. It's really not raising any emotional negativity about this thing called Russia. So I'll give it a -2. Just to remind you, if it's raising emotional negativity in the form of anger, frustration, anxiety, resentment, bitterness, any of those things, that goes into the plus. +1, +2, +3, +4. If it's just factual and doesn't really target the emotions, perhaps just the intelligent mind, then it's a 0. If it has something that pushes it the other way, away from negativity, and I think overall, in the context of a war, this is a wonderful, wonderful picture. Okay, it's not good, guys. It's not good, obviously, but relatively speaking, it's quite nice. Okay, so that's why it's a -2 there. So that means overall we've got a -2 times 5. I give it a multiplying factor because to me the picture and the big title are the ones that generate the main effects. So that's a -10. And then we have a look around. PM addresses public meeting, nothing about Ukraine, China's digital currency. That's interesting, Let's hope that India can roll out an e-rupee. I think it'd be really cool. Eye on China. Wow, 2 topics about China. Army conducts major air drill. Uh-oh, that's negative. Eye on China. Eye on. But it's not about Ukraine, Russia. And then the cricket, because it's a cricketing nation. And then something informative, why Indian students head to countries like Ukraine to study. I think they go to Ukraine and Russia and these types of places, the medical students, because after that, they can do some sort of bridging program and become a doctor in America. At least I've met some people like that. And then stuff that's just to do with stars in India. Okay, so there's nothing. Just that one about why Indian students head to countries. But it's when it comes to the topic that we're looking at, it's not really taking us away. There's nothing there that grabs our attention and says, hey, don't worry about the war in the Ukraine. So I give it a 0, which means all up the times of India, let me put up this one, -10. Okay? So just to contextualize it, these are people exiting Mariupol during a ceasefire. Now, let's have a look at the exact same story in the Sydney Morning Herald, an Australian newspaper, also Cricketing Nation, Australia. And our first impression when we see the front page, obviously, is the picture in the center at the top, and it's got nothing to do with the Ukraine. Emotional teammates and rivals struggle. So it's generating this emotional state, not anger, but sorrow. People are emotional, they're struggling, it's loss, and fought back tears. David Boone, a great Australian cricketer, an absolute legend of the game. He fought back tears. He was trying to keep them inside. So, death of Shane Warne, passed away, suspected heart attack in Thailand. He's watching cricket. So, quite sad news, really, obviously for his family and friends and loved ones, quite sad news. But to get to the Ukraine situation, we actually have to scroll down. And here we kind of get I would call this apocalyptic. This picture looks, well, maybe not apocalyptic. It actually looks like a very run-down Soviet place. There's been a garage fire here, possibly because someone got drunk and left a cigarette there, like without any context. Let's have a look at it more closely. On its own, without any context, it's difficult to say anything. But if we zoom in straight away, we see that this is not a fire from a cigarette. This is something pretty bad. It's extending all the way along. It seems to be broken power lines. So this is quite negative. Looking at that, I'd say you'd have to feel something like a 4. You probably, I don't know, how does that make you feel? If I look at that, I said, I don't know. It doesn't make me feel that sad. I can't see any dead people around, thank goodness. And I don't know, something about a big building. I think because here, I get the feeling like maybe it was a garage. Yeah, but it's definitely emotional. It's sad. It's maybe you're feeling bitter or resentful or angry or something. I don't know, but we'll give it a +4. And then let's look at the title, Mariupol. Okay, so this is the same place as in the previous newspaper. If we come back, you can see here Mariupol. So it is the same news story. It's about Mariupol. And what do they say about Mariupol? Mariupol besieged. Okay, so besieged from siege, like a blockade. It's definitely a war. It's really bad. It means bad things are already happening, and there's a great chance that this place is about to undergo more suffering. So that's very, very strong. Mariupol besieged. So a passive structure. And then they've put Putin there, and that's connecting the negativity of besieged with an actor connected with Russia, Putin. And then what's Putin going to do? Prepares to bombard. So incredibly bellicose language. Really, you get pictures of war and horrible things happening. Bombard cities into submission, like, submit. Incredibly strong title. Incredibly strong, because you've got this human actor here. Interesting enough, not the air force, not the artillery, not the military objects, not the soldiers who'll be doing it, but Putin prepares to bombard because as a president, he can give the order. So interesting choice of using Putin there. In another video we saw in the New York Times that on that day, Putin wasn't there in the English version, but on the same day in the Chinese version, Putin was in a lot of places. So one thing that I've started to pay attention to, like which newspapers are putting the name of the Russian president, which aren't. So that's very, very negative. That's gone beyond emotional. 0 to 5 is emotional, where 5 makes you feel very emotional. I would say this is going to reptilian. Besieged, prepares to bombard cities, and this is like a must-kill scenario. So I'm going to give it a 7. I'm not going to give it higher because it prepares to bombard. It's not bombard and kill civilians. Should it be less than a 7? I think some people might say so. But yeah, you've got here 4 plus 7 is 11. Now, usually I multiply by 5, but I've decided that if it's not at the top, if it's not the first thing, if someone has to scroll down, that's already placing less of an emphasis on it. It might still raise the same emotions if you go down, but you can't feel incredibly sad here and then incredibly sad here, and then more army support for Lismore homelessness, incredibly sad. Something about China and COVID. Military spending increases of battles to triple prison. So that's why I only give it a 2, a multiple factor of 2. So you got 11, that's 22. 22. So the Sydney Morning Herald comes in at 22, which is, fairly strongly negative. It would have been a lot higher if that had been the main picture. And I imagine that if Shane Warne, God bless him, if he hadn't had a suspected heart attack, if he hadn't died, I'm pretty sure that picture would have been up the top. But one of the things about negativity is that the more these negative pictures and words go into the background, the less they have an effect. In fact, if you don't see them and they don't come and affect you in some sort of way, either physically or psychologically, mentally, emotionally, well, if you don't see them, they won't have an effect. Okay, so that's 22 for the Sydney Morning Herald, and the Times of India comes in at a -10. Same story, very different picture. And I think it's really worth looking at the pictures again. If we see there, so right next to each other, incredibly stark contrast, day and night really. And then the language as well. I didn't point it out, but down here, civilians of the Strijik port have been given 5 hours to flee before the Russians, which is very fixed in the mindset of the Westerner. The Russians are coming. The Russians attack again. Very negative language connected with the Russians. Whereas here, Russia declares ceasefire, and the civilians here who are fleeing, in this one here, they exit. So very different verbs of motion as well. Okay, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I look forward to catching you in the next one.